Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Fiona. Fiona, lovely to see you. Thank you for making your time. Let's pretend that we haven't just had a complete riot for the last half hour talking about adoption stuff and pretend to the listeners that this is just us chatting.
Okay, let's go for it.
Let's go for it. Can you introduce yourself to the listeners, please, Fiona?
Yeah, I'm Fiona Myles. I am, well, I'm a bit older. I'm 56. I have a lovely little daughter who is 6. Yeah, and I do. I run a little business. I do lots of little things actually. When I think about it, I'm married. Yeah, I'm all those things. Yep, that's me.
Yeah. And so can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how, why you're on the show? What was it?
Yeah, well, basically, I wanted to come on the show because I believe I am a thriving adoptee because, I have come to terms with a lot of the issues that I believed, were because I was adopted, a lot of the very sort of common issues, like not being able to fit in and lack of connection, broken relationships and all the rest of it. Because I was adopted. I was adopted when I was about 8 months old. I had been, they had wanted to keep me. I found all that out later when I found the natural family, but they'd had wanted to keep me, but they couldn't. So I was given away to a sister of the birth mother. The sister couldn't keep me, so she hot-footed me off to social services, and then I was chosen by my parents when I was about 8 months old.
Wow.
So a bit of to and fro in there, but
a bit of to and fro before you settled in, yeah. Yeah. So you're a couple of years senior to me. I'm 54, right? So yeah, I was. There wasn't too much toing and froing for me. I think I was just in like a short-term foster mother for maybe 4.5 weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
And then to the adoption agency, adoption council, as it called. So were you adopted in Scotland then?
Yes, I was. Yeah, I was adopted in Scotland. I was adopted by a wonderful couple who had an older son, and they didn't really want him to be an only child. So I don't think they were planning on having any more. So they had wanted to adopt a boy, but the boy they wanted, his mum, whatever her circumstances were, got better and took him back. So then they had to go and settle for a girl instead. So so I was adopted in, and then my mother had my younger sister. So a bit of a kind of not a good scenario being adopted and a middle child. So it's like times the middle child syndrome by 1,000, and there you have it.
Right. Sorry, I have not come across that. What's the middle child syndrome?
Well, I was reading about the middle child syndrome, and the middle child syndrome tends to be that the middle child tends to feel a bit sort of not suppose in the middle, but sort of out of it in a way, because they're not the oldest, and so they're not getting responsibility and whatever. So, and they're not the youngest who's getting, looked on as the baby. They're kind of in the middle. So they're in a kind of no man's land kind of thing. So I had been reading about that middle child syndrome, and I was kind of like, yeah, well, I was a middle child, so maybe I was a bit awkward anyway. But being adopted as a middle child, I think probably didn't help me anyway, in my journey of being told and then working out that, I'm different because I'm not theirs. He's theirs, and he's good and kind and handsome, and she's theirs, and she's cute and small and curly haired, and I'm not theirs, and I'm in the middle, and I've got squint teeth, squinty eyes, funny hair. There was a load of sort of things that kind of pressed in on all the other things that kids have to go through anyway.
Yeah. Don't we all feel different for some reason?
Yeah, I would say there probably is that thing where each person as an individual has their own issues and has their own sort of set of, why me's or esteem issues, be that esteem issue too high or too low. I think, yes, there is definitely a case where most children do feel some sense of being slightly not the same as everybody else, but in looking backwards, it's like, well, we're probably all were made completely individually different, but then we're put in a set of circumstances, and I think my circumstances kind of led me to be just feeling that little bit more awkward because I was adopted and different.
Do you mind me saying you don't seem awkward at all now?
Well, I think I'm not.
That's a compliment, by the way, Fiona.
I'm not awkward like I was. I think I still have some of my natural entities, which are, you know, I did one of these things for work where we had to do that. Are you an extrovert or are you an introvert? And I was like, oh God, I hate these things. But I filled it all in, and mine came out that I was an 100% introvert. How did I manage that then? So there was only 2 of us, you know, that were 100% introverted in this particular test that our work decided to do with us. And he's a little bit odd as well. So I kind of thought, you know, were we answering the questions in our kind of feeling a bit oddity, or are we 100% introvert?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I kind of, I think we're all a little bit odd.
You're probably right.
You know, I'd rather be a little bit odd than a sheep somehow.
Yeah,
You know, I don't. It upsets me, actually. Flocks upset me to a certain degree. I don't know where. Yeah. So, what does the phrase "thriving adoptee" mean to you?
Thriving adoptee means to me today, you know, that I have done so much reading and research, you know, into, you know, what adoptees, you know, may feel, how they may behave, how they may, you know, not manage certain circumstances and stuff, because, you know, we have adopted our little sweetheart who, you know, started to sort of show a few little things going on with her, which I kind of recognised from my own self being an adopted kid. You know, just a lot of aggression, a lot of anger, a lot of all this stuff. So I started to read. The first thing I read, and I stuck to it for ages, was the attachment theory, because I thought, you know, it may be more than just being adopted or you know, fostered or whatever. It's that attachment thing, you know, where they've been, their attachment to whoever they were born to has been broken. So it's that just needs maybe, you know, some healing, you know, some, you know, whatever it is that helps a child or an adult to reattach and keep that attachment, so that then they don't go through life bouncing from relationship to relationship, place to place, trying to find that little broken bit that was just attachment.
Yeah. So how has that influenced how you raise your daughter?
Well, it's reinforcing for her that we are here for her regardless, you know, of what she does, how she behaves, you know, how she is, whether she ever manages to intellectually achieve anything, it doesn't matter. Whether she, you know, manages to, you know, come out of this aggressive state, doesn't matter. You know, we are here for you anyway. You know, you're not going to be passed on to anybody else. You know, we're not going to give up on you. We're not going to, you know, tell you that, you know, you're this way because you're adopted. You know, I tended to be, that was said to me quite often, you know, that, you know, I was a kind of behaving like that because it was adopted, you know.
So who told you that?
My parents.
Right. Yeah. So interesting, because how did that influence you?
Well, I mean, it's words certainly do influence you hugely, especially as a child, you know, and I remember incidents, you know, as there's a few sort of incidents I remember in particular, and one in particular that, you know, really made a big impact on me we were kind of sort of 60s, 70s kids, you know, in a small village. And when visitors came, you were introduced, and then you had to go and do one. You know, you didn't stay and, you know, get involved in the visitors or anything. And this couple had come to the house, and we'd never met them before. And, you know, he was kind of, he was laughing and joking about stuff. And then we were introduced and whatever. And he said, "Oh, look at him, you know, isn't he like your dad and whatever? And oh, look at her, isn't she like her mum?" And then he looked at me in the middle and he said, and are you the postman's?" You know, I thought it was awful funny. And I was kind of like, okay, was there any need to say that? You know, but for me, again, it was just enforcing that, well, I am adopted. I'm not theirs. So, you know, he's going to make jokes, he's going to make fun of how I look, you know, that I look different and whatever. So that kind of reinforced that kind of feeling of being different, you know, and not belonging in that nest, you know, kind of thing, if you want to put it like that, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about what about hearing those words from your mum, your mum and dad? They're kind of, they're, you know, telling you that your own behaviour was because you were adopted.
Because it, you know, I think, you know, maybe they felt, looking back, you know, I can say it in looking back, and at the time, I suppose it just reinforced the difference. You know, you're not the same, you know, but looking back, I think somewhere maybe they were kind of trying to tell me that I was genetically different. You know, I was, that maybe my natural mum was like that, you know, angry and very forceful, aggressive, you know, and all the rest of the things that I was at the time. So I think in looking back, I think they thought maybe they were doing a good thing to make me think that, you know, I am like somebody. You know, I don't know. I don't know. You know, I'm trying not to make the same mistakes with my little one, you know, because I think it was maybe a mistake to say that, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's a very tricky area, this, you know, and maybe they were trying to help, but it seems to me like they were actually reinforcing within you how different you already felt. That's what it seems like to me. That seems to be have been the impact. Maybe not, that wasn't their intention, but that was, it seems to me that was their impact, the impact of their words on you. Would you say that?
Yeah, I would agree with that, because it certainly did impact me, not in a positive way. It kind of impacted me in a more negative way. And I became, I became much more aggressive, you know, and I started being very, you know, ungrateful and unhappy at being in that family, you know, and I said some terrible things to my mother, you know, and I kept asking her to send me back. Can you not send me back, you know? And I suppose, you know, obviously, I don't know if she could have. She probably could have sent me back into care, but, you know, and obviously I know now she couldn't send me back. But as a child, you don't know that, you know.
Yeah. So how old were you when this was happening? Or when
Probably,
it began, or when
I would say quite young. I mean, I remember my first memory of being told I was adopted, I was about 6. I remember it being said, you know, you're chosen, you're special, you know, and all those nice words that you're told, you know, we chose you, we went and we picked you out, and you were in this cot and you were jumping up and down, you had all this lovely hair and all the rest of it. And it's a nice concept, you know, that there was all these babies in cots and they chose me. But I've kind of realised that might not have been the truth. I'm just waiting on my adoption files. I didn't even know that I could have my adoption files. So I'm waiting on them coming to find out, you know, what was the reality of how they chose me, you know, to dispel that myth of all these babies in cots. It may have been the truth, but I don't know.
For me, there's a fundamental mismatch. Your adoptive parents were they contradicted themselves. So on one hand, it was this. On the other hand, it was that. And to have your behavior blamed on adoption is going to make you think bad about adoption.
Yeah, for me, my view of being adopted wasn't positive, you know, as you know, and that kind of not being able to, what's that word, connect with that, and I wasn't able to articulate the emotional side of what I was feeling, because it was, you know, it wasn't really, well, there was no social workers around or anything. I didn't have social workers in my life. I didn't have, you know, any support and stuff like that. And I didn't know anybody else that was adopted, actually, you know, when I was young. So I didn't have anybody to kind of relate to, even, you know, as a child, you know, how's it going for you in the adopted camp? You know, I didn't have that either.
Yeah. I can, you know, I can see some echoes of my own frustration and anger within your story, despite the fact that, you know, I didn't get those contradictory messages. I got occasional kind of the chosen special stuff, you know, but not laid on with a trowel, as we say in Yorkshire, you know. Not laid on really thick, not laid on in a gentle, honest, loving way, but not an over the top way. And I had none of the other stuff that you went through. And yet I had, you know, some frustrations about, I think I still have some frustrations about communication and that sort of thing. So what was it that what was it that has shifted for you over the years that mean that you don't seem to be like that at all now?
Yeah.
What shifted?
I would say the sort of going through my teens and all the rest of it. I mean, I ended up leaving home really early, kind of encouraged to go, really, if I'm honest, because I was an absolute nightmare. I was furious. I was an angry little teenager, in trouble all the time, you know, and all the rest of it. And so I was encouraged to kind of go and get a living job somewhere. So off I went. I ended up in London, you know, just turned 17, ended up getting involved with drugs, alcohol, prostitution, you name it, for a few years. I was in an absolute nightmare of a mess, you know, and the most awful things happened to me. But, you know, in it, it was just like, this is just life, you know, this is my life and I'm living it right now. And everything was just being, you know, damped down with the drugs and whatever. And I wasn't having to think about anything, which was absolutely fantastic, you know, for a few years. But then, you know, life comes to a grinding halt, you know, and you realize that, you know, you're not going to live forever. And that was basically what I had got told in the hospital. You know, I'd had these big seizures and was told, you know, you're going to kill yourself basically with all this carry on. So, you know, I just started to think about, you know, I need to kind of get myself together here. You know, I can't go on like this forever. And I actually ended up going to a church. It was a long story. I'm not going to go through all that, how it came about, but it was a bit interesting how it came about. But I ended up going to a church anyway. And there I actually became, you know, whatever happened. And obviously I know now, at the time I was like, something's happening here. But I know now that I had an experience, a spiritual experience with God. And that was, for me, that brought about some changes for me. And I began to realize that there's more to life. Number one, there's more to life than you. There's more to life than your hurts and your trauma. And, you know, you need to get a bit of balance going here. And so over time, you know, I began to look at the stuff that had happened before, started to look at that. And over years, I began to see, you know, and settle and understand that, you know, okay, that happened then, this is who you were then, but there's a whole life you know, going forward that you can reach out and grab a hold of, you know. And at that point, 2 failed marriages behind me, you know, and now I've been happily married for nearly 20 years, you know. So it brought about changes because, you know, I had to stop and look at myself. And yes, the faith part and the spiritual part, you know, learning to pray, reading my Bible and getting that kind of influence was good. And that's what did it for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I came up with something a couple of years ago, I like a little soundbite, despite being a guy that sometimes goes on a bit, you know, talks too much. I like little nuggets. I came up with a real nugget. Talking
I love a nugget.
Talking to one of my wife's best friends, and I said, "There's no such thing as a second-hand epiphany."
Ooh, yeah, there's no such thing as a
second-hand epiphany, right? So you had an epiphany.
Mm-hmm.
And so for people, I'm not a religious guy, right? So for, you know, if epiphany sounds a bit religious to you, listener, then let's have it, and let's call it an aha moment, right?
Yeah.
Or an insight, or if we're worried about, if we've got insight envy, so we're listening to Fiona and snoring and thinking, how can I have that insight, right? You know, let's call it an insight lut or epiphanet. That's just a small epiphany.
An epiphany.
A small epiphany, an epiphanet. I can't remember. I got that from chatting to somebody a few months ago. No, last year, I think. I can't remember. Sorry, I can't remember who it was to credit them. You know, an insight lut or an epiphanet, right? So we can't have them. We can't have them, but we can't have them. You know, there's no such thing as a second-hand one. We have to have them ourselves. You know, we can't go out to the shop and buy a second-hand epiphany and think, you know, I've read, you know, I've read this book, or I've read this, you know, and I'm guaranteed to have the same. It's guaranteed to have the same impact on my life. But what we can do, the only thing that we can do, is hang around at the place where epiphanies are like to happen. And the reason I say that, listeners, and I have said it before on the podcast, is because you, listeners, and you, Fiona, are doing that right now. You are hanging around in the hope that you hear something.
Epiphany.
Sorry?
That you get your epiphany.
That you get your epiphanet, yeah. So keep hanging out in the space of where the epiphanies happen. Have you got a view on what it was?
On what the epiphany was?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I completely and utterly believe that I had a moment where I asked Jesus Christ to come into my heart, and he did, you know, and I accepted that and have moved forward with that, you know, and it's because as a person, you know, and a person who's been through the stuff I've been through, I was a bit kind of like, is this stuff real or what, you know, or am I just having a moment here because I've had a really bad time and this feels good, you know? Of course I questioned it. I'm fairly normal. And as time went on, you know, and the more I read, the more I got involved, the more I thought, and the more experiences of a similar type happened, I was like, no, this is as real as I need it to be. This is reality for me. I know now that there is a spiritual side to life, and I'm embracing it, and I'm going forward with that, and I'm going to grow in that. You know, I'm going to learn more about it, and I'm going to grow in it. And that's just what I've done for the past 26 years. Yeah.
And have you got any non-religious language to explain what happened to you?
Gosh, non-religious language. I think, you know, and if you want to try and express that in a non-religious language. You know, I had an experience with something bigger than me. Is that non-religious? Did that work?
We're just having a conversation. I'm exploring it, you know.
Yeah.
So bigger than
I think
you.
that's the best I can come up with, yeah.
Yeah, something bigger than you. So I read a book or listened to a book recently, and it was he describes him. It was a regular kid, so this is nothing to do with adoption, but he was a regular kid. His dad was a war correspondent, like a foreign journalist of some nature.
Mm-hmm.
So he calls himself, he became a terror tourist, I think is the word that he used. He was like an adrenaline junkie. He decided, he went over to Serbia during the troubles, atrocities over there, and he nearly died. He nearly got killed by a Serbian guy putting a gun into his mouth. And on the when he was on the verge of dying, he laughed at this guy, and this guy thought that the guy with the gun in his mouth thought it was so funny that he didn't kill him, didn't pull the trigger.
Right. Because he laughed at him.
Because he laughed in the face of death.
Right. Yeah.
He laughed at the guy. He laughed in the face of death. I think. I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly what happened. But so he became like an adrenaline junkie, and he did some mad things, and one of them was trying heroin for 2 weeks to see what it was like coming off it. And 5 years later, he came off it.
Oh man.
When he saw that he was bigger than the drug.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he saw something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
He'd been an addict, a victim of that, of the drug. The drug was bigger than him. And then he had a flash of insight, and you can't have second-hand epiphany, folks. And he saw himself as bigger than the drug. So it went from slave and master to master and slave. It switched round.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm thinking that was a really bad analogy, but given the Black Lives Matter stuff, and thinking I shouldn't have said that. But I never edit these shows, so I'm just going to keep going. Sorry, guys, if I've caused some offence with my epiphany. A lot of apologies. I never intend to upset anybody. But yeah, bigger than you. Yeah, bigger than you. So on that kind of thing, it's that, it's the self-identity for me. It's everybody talks about identity, and we have this. So identity is often discovered. It's thought of in terms of name.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you? Who are you?
Yeah.
So I'm Simon Jonathan Ben, but I was David Anthony Fowler. So if I've had two names, I can't actually be either.
Yeah, which one is it?
Well, which one is it? Would be the logical thing, right, to say, definitely. But to you, so am I David Anthony Flower? Am I Simon Jonathan Ben? And you could get very confused about that, right? What happened to me when I saw that the original birth certificate with that name on it, it was like, ooh, I've had two names. And the next thought I had was, I can't actually be either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can't be either. Who I truly am can't be either, because the truth is always true.
Right.
Yeah. The truth never changes.
Yeah.
our names are just labels.
Yeah.
That's kind
Yeah.
of, I'll
There's
say,
something someone else gave us.
yeah, something else. So so we're not even, so we're not our name. We're not, and this gets very confusing. People get very confused about this, right? So we're not our name. We're not our role. We're not our body, because that changes. Our role,
Yes.
anything that changes, anything changes can't be the ultimate truth.
Yeah.
So to use religious language, you could say, well, we're all children of God. Yeah. So whatever our names, we're all children of God.
Yeah.
And then the bit that I often quote is the French philosopher who said, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Right.
Spiritual beings having a human experience. So if we break that down, spirit, well, you might be talking about Holy Spirit from a religious perspective, but you're talking about, we're spiritual, as in we're not material, we're not our bodies. Being is the present tense, isn't it? Or is it present participle? I am.
Yeah.
I am is who we are. I am. And then the human experience is all the human experience stuff. So I am is constant.
Yeah.
I am happy. I am sad. The I am never changes, but the feeling does. Or I am traumatized, or I am healed, but the I am is the same. And then we're back. So I am that I am is I think you want. So that's who we are.
Yeah.
That not our thoughts which change, not our feelings which change, not our role in life which changed. So you're a mother now, but you haven't always been a mother. So that can't be essential to yourself. That can't be at the essence of who you are. That's something that you do. Like, I'm a podcaster because I'm a podcaster, but I haven't done that. I haven't always done that. I've only done that since April. So it can't be of the essence. So the thing is that spiritual beings having a human experience, all the trauma, all the story, all the drama, all the heartache, all the hurt, all the insecurity, that's all in the human experience. And that's really loud, and that draws us right in. Whereas we're not focused on the piece of who we are underneath that experience. Does that make any sense?
It does make sense. It does make sense, because one of the things that I realized for myself was when I was kind of, in that place of recovery, I found that the call to the wild, was really loud, so to speak. The call to go back to that madness was fairly loud, whereas the call to come to a place of peace and calm, that's not so loud. But it's kind of, I had to get myself to a place where I was like, I need to be over here. Over there is loud, wild, and all the rest of it. And there's not a lot of healing getting done over there. All you're doing is layering up, on all the madness that's gone on. Whereas over here, this is where, we can sit down, we can look at, all the stuff, the incidents as they've gone along. And a lot of stuff for me, a lot of those big things that happened, in that teenage sort of section of my life, I didn't actually get real healing from them until this year. And I think that's why I'm now kind of like able to be in a position where I do want to reach out and help other people to understand that, these are feelings, and they are, feelings they're neither, here nor there, but they are feelings. They're neither right nor wrong, but they are your feelings. And it's maybe just if I can in some way, encourage people to understand that your feelings are neither right nor wrong, but they are feelings, but to move forward, to try and bring some kind of foundation to move forward from. I mean, I had counselling this year because I realised that to be in a stronger position to help my little girl, I needed to get a lot of my own issues looked at properly. I tried counselling years ago, but it sounds a bit ridiculous, but I was like, I just thought the counsellor was a bit mad, you know, in a few different scenarios. I was like, what are you talking about? You don't even know what I'm saying to you. And I felt like the counsellors couldn't get where I was coming from somehow. And then
what if the counsellor was mad?
Maybe they were, I don't know, but I was like, I was out of there after like first session. I don't know whether I'm the kind of person where I just clink straight away whether someone's going to get me or not. I don't know, but I just knew they weren't understanding. And there was, to me, I was getting given cliches that, you know, I could have given myself out of a book. But I found this lady who I connected with as on a business level rather than looking for a counsellor. And then when she started telling me what she did, I was like, oh, right, okay, and I just said, let's give it a go. We'll do the counselling session. And she was amazing. She listened. You know, she didn't jump in with a cliche. She didn't jump in with a reason. She didn't jump in with a, this is why this happened or this. She kind of let me speak and only interjected with the odd kind of, well, have you ever looked at that like that? You're just a simple sentence. And that produced this torrent of words from me where I was almost healing myself, if that makes sense. I was almost working my way around all my words and my stuff to like, oh yeah, you know. So it was 6-7 weeks of brilliance for me anyway, where I was like, right, I get that. And in between all that, I'm reading all this stuff on attachment and I'm trying to get my head around what's my daughter going through. And yeah, and that's when I just decided I need to get my story out there. I need to let people know, you know, how it was for me, whether it was like that for them or not. That's irrelevant, really. It's my story. So, but as for wanting to go on and help people, that's what's more important to me, is to be able to just find a connection with someone. You know, not everyone's going to connect with my story. Not everyone's going to connect with the way I am. But even if a few do and are able to find that little foundational balance where they can then springboard off into whatever it is that, you know, they've always wanted to do but never have because they have all these hang-ups, you know.
Fantastic. Do you know why you seem surprised that you healed yourself?
Yeah, I suppose I was. I was kind of like, oh, this is interesting. I felt it was like a really interesting way of counselling because she didn't give me a cliche. She didn't even give me any homework. She gave me a sheet once, you know, to look at about grief, you know, and it was good. But, you know, she did, yeah, the talk, she allowed me to talk. I think that was the main thing.
So why do you think you were surprised that you healed yourself?
I suppose I would say I was surprised that I healed myself because, you know, it was kind of like, well, did I need counselling at all? How's this happened? You know, maybe I should have just have spoken to somebody randomly and talked it all out, you know, but it's just something I never did.
Yeah. So for me, the reason you healed yourself is because there's no such thing as a second-hand epiphany.
Right. I get that. So I got my own sort of epiphany on what had happened, where it had been, how that had happened. So I got my own sort of revelation, epiphany on why that was.
Yeah.
I just talking it out and just getting the odd prompt to move me over there or move me over there.
She asked questions, you went within, you found new answers, you talked stuff out, and that's where the healing happened. So if we can counter that to how your adoptive parents were, to how your parents were. They said, oh, it's because you're adopted, right? They talked at you. Your counsellor asked you questions, brief interjections, no cliches, and you found yourself. Like it's an inside job. And because feelings are an inside job, so healings are an inside job. And for me, on this, it's this, we're raised on the idea that somebody else will heal us. So you could say that from a medical perspective, right? That the doctor heals us. And that's how we think of it. But when we cut ourselves, maybe we'll go on to the primal wound here. Maybe we won't, because you've not read it. Don't read it, listeners. No, really, don't read it. Well, listen to I'll put a link in the to the other episode where I've talked about the primal wound before, the other episode. Listen to that podcast, and then decide whether you want to read it or not. So we cut ourselves.
Yeah.
We put a plaster on it, don't we?
Yes.
Now, does the plaster actually make us heal?
No, probably not. No, it just covers the wound, stop it getting manky.
Yeah. So the healing comes from the inside. Now somebody's going to say, well, I mean, yeah, it's a metaphor, you know. What about broken bones, Simon? Well, we put a leg in pot. Does the pot heal it? No, it just keeps the leg straight while it's the wound, the bones are healing themselves. But what about, I don't know, something else, Simon? I don't know. It's just a metaphor, right? But in this sense, when it comes to emotional, spiritual, mental, all that stuff, it comes from the inside. But we've got all these people telling us it comes from the outside, and we've got all these people. They have to sell us, don't they? Like all the stuff on Facebook. It's like the classic line is, heal, and so it's got a positive headline, heal. The next line is, I used to feel like you. Do you sometimes feel primarily wounded? It starts it meets us where we're at.
Yeah.
And then it says, and I used to feel just like you did until I discovered the amazing power of.
Ta-da.
And if you pay me, then I will show you the secrets.
Yeah.
And we're raised on this idea that healing comes from outsiders. But for you, it came from inside. Somebody asked you a question. You answered it, and in answering it, you found your healing. The reason I'm labouring is this, because it is from within, and I want the listeners to get that. Because I think it'll stop. It would have been really useful for me 10 years ago, right? For somebody to tell me it comes from within.
Yeah.
That's why I'm labouring
Okay.
and joining the dots.
Yeah.
I'm turning it into a teaching point.
Okay.
Does it make sense to you?
Well, yeah, of course it makes sense to me, because that's obviously what happened for me, with the counselling and in that sort of space. And like for me as well, that I then I went into this little moment of, well, why didn't I do that years ago? Why did that not happen years ago? Could I not have talked myself round years ago? but I didn't. So what? You know, I have now. You know, I'm there now, and you know, I'm going forward. You know, into it's like, I have to say that going through life, I always felt this kind of little cloud wafting around, just a little dark cloud, you know, of all this stuff, and it's like the counselling and, you know, working that stuff round. It's like that little cloud got blown away, and it's almost like there's a whole new me has appeared out of seemingly nowhere, but this whole new me was there all the time, you know. So it's kind of like, it's like the lid's been lifted off and out pops like a jack in the box. Here I am, you know.
Yeah.
Come and meet me. Let me
So
just tell.
I'm going to play with your metaphor with something that I heard recently, right? So there was this cloud, and we all have a cloud, right? But we aren't the cloud with the blue sky behind it.
Like we are, did you say there, we are not the cloud, we are the blue sky behind it?
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose that's in a way just what I've kind of described, in as much as it's like something's just been wide open for me, which had always been kind of shut, I suppose. It's been a strange sort of experience, because I don't think I expected this much, you know, what's the right word for it? Freedom, you know, to come from just looking at all this stuff and getting this stuff out there. And I think, you know, I put a lot of it down to getting my own little girl, you know, and wanting to really, really make sure, because I've never been a parent before. You know, I was never able to have children. So it was always a deep desire, you know, to have a child. And then, you know, Georgie came along when I was 50. So it was kind of like, you know, I knew I didn't want her to feel the way I did, or have any of the things said to her that were said to me by people who, you know, were stating a fact, but, you know, it really didn't need to be said in the way it was said, kind of thing. So I want her to not be so disaffected by the fact that she's not ours.
She is yours.
She is ours, absolutely. And that's the one thing that we do, you know, let her know, that she is ours, you know, and she'll always be ours. But she does know that she had a tummy mummy, you know, because we have a connection, and we wanted to make sure we had a connection with our natural family. And we do, you know, she has a connection with our natural family.
So what do you want her to know that you don't think she does know?
Oh, what do I want her to know that I don't think she knows? I don't know. I don't even know if I can answer that sensibly right now, because she is 6. She does have special needs. You know, she doesn't think like we do yet. Maybe she never will. I don't know. But I do want her to know where she came from. I think I'm able to answer that more than what you said before, unless I misunderstood what you said before. But I do want her to know where she came from. And I do want her to know, you know, who she looks like. I do want her to know that she has this certain quirkiness, because, you know, I'm like that, you know, or because she's actually my great niece from the family I was adopted out of. So in itself, it's an unusual set of circumstances. And yeah, so it is, it's a little different. But I'm happy that we're able to tell her things, you know, that I never was told. You know, why did I look like that? Why did I behave like that? You know, and all, you know, just a lot of the questions I know that I wanted to know.
I think what you said was that you don't want what other people say. You don't want, well, first time you said that you don't want other people to say nasty things to her. And then I think you also said you don't want what other people say to her to affect her.
Yeah. I get you now. I know what you mean now. Yeah, because I had that incident with those visitors, and that wasn't the only time that it was pointed out that I was different. And then there was another big incident with a girlfriend that my brother had, who he was away in the forces, and he was coming back, and I'd taken a phone call from him to say that he wasn't coming back that night, he was coming back the next day. So I went round to tell the girlfriend that he wasn't coming back till the next day, and she was out with all her mates and whatever. And I went up and said, he's not coming home tonight, he'll be home tomorrow, thinking I was doing, quite a good favour, actually, just letting her know that, not to come round tonight because she'd be disappointed. And she looked at me and very sort of angrily said, I don't know, who are you to come and tell me that? You're not even his real sister, you're adopted, in front of all her mates. And I felt a few things at that point. I felt I was raging and I wanted to batter her there and then, but I didn't. And I felt betrayed by my brother, because I thought, what did he tell her that for? I wasn't sure why would he even tell her that. And then I thought, I felt so hurt that someone would think I wasn't his sister. I am his sister. Been his sister since, I arrived, kind of thing. Do you know, there was so much exploded in my head in that teenage moment, that kind of caused an awful explosion of emotions and all sorts of. I would say that was the main catapult into the darkness, let's put it like that.
Yeah. Wow. So I'm just conscious of time here. Can you tell us a little bit about your book, and then people can get a flavour for it, and then they can check it out on Amazon or whatever?
Yeah, my book is written, it's out there on Amazon. It's called This Is Me, No Darkness Too Deep. And it details, the first half of it details, me, being adopted and being brought up, and my childhood, then going off out into the wildness of London and getting caught up in all the addiction and all the rest of it. And then the second sort of half of it, it's all one, so there's no chapters or anything, it's very quick to read. And then that goes into how I came to a place of faith, and how I wasn't exactly very great at that either. I've kind of talked about a lot of the mistakes I've made, and just because I have that, I'm a Christian, I'm certainly not perfect. I've made loads of mistakes, and I think I wanted people to know that, it's not all bells and whistles when you become a Christian. You don't suddenly become like an angelic type person. You're still you, So yeah, that's kind of the second half is like that. And my second book, due out soon, is just simply called Adopted, and that looks more at some of my feelings around being adopted, and it talks about my relationship problems and my infertility issue, and how we came to have our little girl.
Yeah. Wow. Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing so much. It's been a lovely conversation.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
And thanks to you too, listeners. And we'll see you or speak to you very soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.